It's Wednesday, May 28th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. We are now past Memorial Day. We continue to roll through here in the offseason, and join me to do just that, to talk a little ball, is Alfredo Brown of Football Guys. Alfredo, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, man. I think you and I were talking about this beforehand. It's weird to get back into the swing of things after a long weekend, but I can't think of a better way to start the week than just talking ball. So you're absolutely right. Great day.
Exactly. It's always a hell of a day to talk ball, but especially now to get back into the swing of things, it is definitely a big day to do it. And we got a big show here ahead of us, an annual exercise for me that I don't know if we've done on the podcast before. I always write an article on this, but this is something I wanted to bring to the podcast feed here. We are going to talk quarterback wilderness. A little table setting before we get into it. If you're not familiar with my kind of stupid concept of the quarterback wilderness, it's basically like, does this pass catcher have a good quarterback? Like, is the guy throwing the ball to this wide receiver, or I think we've got at least one tight end here on the list today. Is this pass catcher, like, is this guy above board, basically? Is he an above average, like, is he an answer for this team? So the guys that are sometimes entering the quarterback wilderness are maybe losing one of those players that's above board. The guys exiting quarterback wilderness, they are getting a solution, or at least it looks like they're getting a solution. So we're going to talk basically state of the quarterback wilderness. In the first segment, we're going to talk clear guys that are entering or leaving quarterback wilderness. Segment 2, we're going to talk through some guys that are still wandering the quarterback wilderness. These are players that have really, if they ever have had a solution at quarterback, it's been a minute. These are guys that are still wandering the wilderness, mostly young players there. And then third segment, this is going to be the interesting one. It's the fork in the road players. Like, based on how their quarterback turns out, they could either be exiting or they could still be wandering through quarterback wilderness. But Alfredo, with enough table setting here, let's get into the first segment, which is just the guys that I think are and again, this is my list. So I'm going to ask Alfredo if he thinks I've missed anybody here. So I'm just going to throw out the two guys that I think are clearly entering quarterback wilderness based on what's happened this offseason is one, DK Metcalf of the Pittsburgh Steelers now. By the way, I think DK Metcalf has somehow been involved in this exercise every single year, because he, was part of the Russell Wilson trade, the Geno Smith thing. It turned out he actually wasn't entering quarterback wilderness. I think we could say he is definitely entering quarterback wilderness right now. And then we've also got Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. So let's start with Metcalf here. I honestly, Alfredo, I guess I'll throw it to you this way. If Aaron Rodgers signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers, does that even move the needle in terms of him being entering quarterback wilderness or not? Because to me, I don't know if even Rodgers is above board in being considered a guy who is a clear-cut solution.
He's not out of the wilderness if Rodgers signs there, but it's at least a better situation than Mason Rudolph. And by the way, I do have one suggestion for the wilderness thing. Andy Behrens narrate this as David Attenborough. I'm just saying that would be a great addition to this show going forward each year.
Okay. But I like that.
DK Metcalf, man, you'd have to assume that with Aaron Rodgers going there, it's a better situation, right? And like, Rodgers is a good fit for the whole Arthur Smith thing that they're doing there. Lots of play action, and Rodgers has been using that a ton, especially later on in his career. He and Geno Smith were almost identical to one another this past season in terms of deep pass attempts, going 20 yards or further. They were 8th and 9th in terms of attempts. So I almost want to say it's a little bit more of the same, but if we're sticking to the theme of the show, yes, there's still very much a wilderness that we don't quite know that this is actually going to be good for DK Metcalf. I think from the outside, you're saying, okay, there should be lots of volume. It's an improvement with Aaron Rodgers, but we actually don't know how good Aaron Rodgers really is anymore, or even how good the Steelers offense is going to be anymore. So yeah, he's definitely still in that wilderness.
Yeah, Rodgers ranks 23rd in adjusted yards per attempt since his final MVP season with the Packers. Like, he has definitely been, at least statistically, a below average quarterback in the two seasons that we've actually seen him. Now, I think a lot of us are probably clinging to the last, 4 games with the Jets where he was pumping a lot of passing production, but it wasn't as if they were a great offense. And I don't know, to me, it's like, again, if it's Rodgers or Mason Rudolph, I'm I'm just suspicious that this is actually happening. Like, tell me if that's stupid. Like, the longer that this goes, I just feel like maybe he doesn't end up signing with the Steelers and maybe just takes a year off of football or something like that. To me, I think it's on the
Yes, I'm the
table.
same. I'm the same. Like, this is the most Aaron Rodgers thing to possibly do. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if a month from now he's like, actually, I'm going to get myself ready for the Team USA flag football Olympic Games. Like, that's just that would be the most Aaron Rodgers thing to do ever. So we see all the reports about him that he's
Yeah.
working out with Steelers players and stuff like that. So I mean, the writing seems to be on the wall, but I don't think we're ever truly out of the woods with Rodgers.
Where do you have Metcalf ranked? And like, is he even somebody that's kind of in your draft plans? Like, very, very early stages, but best ball, whatever you're doing right now, is he someone that you are actively drafting around, or kind of excited to take?
So I don't have an exact number on him yet, but he's going to be hovering around that wide receiver 24 area for me, like always in that late wide receiver 2, just because he still is DK Metcalf. We're still doing a lot of dynasty stuff over at Football Guys.
Of
And
course.
I just, man, it's going to be hard. I think that we're romanticizing DK Metcalf a little bit for what he's done in the
Mm-hmm.
past. I don't know that it's going to be there anymore, especially as these type of receivers get older. The athleticism falls off quick, and you end up with a Tyreek Hill situation where all of a sudden
Mm.
it's not an older guy relying on route running anymore. So there's just enough things up in the air that make me a little nervous. So he's not necessarily. I'm not going out of my way to go draft DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And where we have him, like, consensus ranking wise, if you're watching this on YouTube, wide receiver 23, like, that feels about right to me.
Yeah.
Again, if I'm like looking for a wide receiver too, I probably is somebody that I think I feel more comfortable if I have two clear cut high volume wide receivers that I've drafted ahead of him, and he's more of that when he's gonna hit you with a hammer like a big week, because of some of those play action in breakers that you highlighted, then you can have that, like, you have the insulation basically to take that on in your lineup. I feel better about him in one of those situations, but like some of the players we rank behind him, Jameson Williams, like, I think I might straight up rather just have Jameson Williams, like, basically like that
Yeah.
archetype of player. I'd rather have him, even Devontae Smith. And again, the guy that we're going to talk about next, like, I might even prefer him. So again, I think Metcalf definitely for this exercise is squarely in the quarterback wilderness. He just makes, even again, for me, even if Rodgers is there, I still think he is in the wilderness. And if you're talking dynasty at best, that is a 1-year solution. I don't see Rodgers playing for the Steelers in 2026, especially with how many draft picks they've loaded up on. I think that will be their time to actually go get a real quarterback solution. Let's move to Chris Olave here, who it's weird to say he's in the wilderness, Alfredo, because I think that Carr and Olave really never saw the game the same way. They never really had the best chemistry in the world. That being said, Carr was 14th and 14th in adjusted yards per attempt and 15th in EPA per dropback in his 2 seasons with the Saints. Like, from a statistical perspective, he was definitely above the line of what we'd look for from a quarterback wilderness type player. But so now that he's gone, he's a weird player to talk about because I think we're still looking for a quarterback to actually maximize Olave. That wasn't Carr, but we certainly don't know if that's going to be Tyler Shuck or anything of that nature. So what are your thoughts on Olave this year as he, like I said, I think right now, unless Shuck is the guy, is entering quarterback wilderness?
Yeah, well, I mean, a bunch of these, especially a guy like Olave too, they've kind of just been in quarterback wilderness for so long. And you mentioned it, there was just no connection with Derek Carr. And it was like, I think the thing that everyone still looks at is the big blow up and the fight on the sideline, but that was just the
Yeah.
most publicized thing. Like, just the timings were just almost always off. And it's almost to the point where you say maybe Tyler Shuck's not that good, but maybe there's a Jameis Winston level of production that can come at the quarterback spot. And like, I actually don't mean that very tongue in cheek here. Like, it could actually be good for Olave. And I'm glad you mentioned it before with DK Metcalf. There's going to be players in our rankings that you almost have to rank behind another player, but you'd actually rather go with that lower ranked player in a draft. And Chris Olave is one of those guys because I think that he's got that upside for high target volume, high efficiency deep downfield. And he's just one of those guys that we've seen. Tyler Shuck, actually pretty good deep ball thrower coming out of Louisville. For all the other bonehead things that you see in the crazy clips, good deep ball thrower, good arm. And actually I have a question for you, Matt. So with this new offense that they're doing, Kellen Moore's running the show. Olave has mostly been on the outside, but now they've got, I mean, they had Rashid Shaheed. They have Brandon Cooks now as well. Is there a chance you think that they move Chris Olave into the slot a little bit more in this offense and try to be a little more creative with his usage?
I'm glad you brought that up because that was something that I almost had to keep myself from getting too excited about with Chris Olave, just because, look,
I
we
did that to
all
myself.
know, well, we all know the injury risk with him and the concussions and things of that nature. And now, obviously, now we know for sure he's in quarterback wilderness with Shuck, or, people still throw like Jake Hayner and like Rattler into the equation. Like, I think Shuck is
Right.
unless Shuck is just unplayable in training camp. I think he's playing every single game this year, and I don't really
Yeah.
think I don't think it's going to be a discussion. But because of what Moore has done for even a guy like Devontae Smith, which I think these guys are kind of comparable players, right? They're both technicians, were pro level route runners in college. They don't need to play in the slot, but they can be weaponized in the slot. And Devontae Smith took a career high routes from the slot last year in Kellen Moore's offense, and we've obviously seen him do this with CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen in the past. So I want to get really excited about that. Like, again, just comparing him to DK Metcalf, like, I think we've seen the best of DK Metcalf. That doesn't mean that he can't have a
Right.
good season this year, but I think we have firmly not seen the best of Chris Olave's game yet, which is why I like you said, I might rank Olave behind him because I think there are some risks there, but I want to draft into a guy like that where we haven't maybe seen his best season yet.
Yeah, and with Devontae Smith, you mentioned him getting his highest rate out of the slot. He also had his best fantasy points per game of his career coming out of the slot this year. So it's one of these things that I kind of want it to happen for Chris Olave to see how good he can be and what that ceiling can be, but I don't think it's necessary to happen for him to actually be relevant for fantasy.
No, but again, somebody that I'm trying to keep myself level on. I don't want to get too excited just because we know the clear risks, but God, I love this player so much, and I really do think that there is a level from him production-wise that we have not seen yet. So that's a good point about the slot stuff, and that also might just lend itself to more layup opportunities for Shuck as he gets his feet wet in the NFL. So those are the only two guys I think that are squarely, like, really no debate, no question asked. Like, they're in quarterback wilderness at this point. Are there any other names that we aren't going to discuss later that you think actually kind of fit into this bucket?
Yeah, when I saw this on the show sheet here, it was hard not to think of Steph Diggs, who
Mm.
has been blessed with, good quarterback play everywhere he's been. And I'm a Drake May believer. I love Drake May. Don't get me wrong. He's still relatively unproven. And I think everything can go really well for Diggs and May in New England. I'm just excited to see Drake May actually have some weapons. And if Stephon Diggs can be healthy and even just get to somewhat the same level he was at last year. Talking about a guy who can just be there with 7 targets per game. He's a good route winner consistently. Like, he can play outside or in the slot. And I think a lot of people start to think, oh, he's only a slot guy. Like, let's just old yeller him and sail off into the sunset as a slot receiver that can't move. Like, he could do a lot. And it's a good fit too there with Pop Douglas in the slot. You got Kyle Williams who can be a field stretcher. I'm intrigued to see what this offense ends up doing.
Yeah, see, that was just Alfredo being fair and balanced, and I this is my list, and I was not fair and balanced because I view Drake May already, and maybe this isn't fair, but I view him already as somebody that is above quarterback wilderness based on just what he showed last year. I'm very excited about May, and I think him getting a guy like Drake, like Stephon Diggs, is going to make a big difference for him. So you're right, though. Diggs has been sneaky. He hasn't always been content, obviously, but he's been sneaky blessed throughout his career that, like, probably the worst quarterback he's played with was Sam Bradford for a hot moment there in Minnesota. Remember that week
Yeah, I
1
forgot
New
about that.
Orleans Saints game? I'll never forget that game, by the way, because I was such a huge Diggs guy, and I actually missed watching that game live because I was looking for an apartment in LA at the time, which when you're looking for an apartment in LA, that is a full-time job in and of itself. So I missed that, like, Sam Bradford Fire Fest to, like, Thielen and Diggs against the Saints. So immediately I get back to my current place and, like, rewatch it that night. That was how excited I was about it. But yeah, that's probably like the worst quarterback he's ever played with. He had Cousins, he had Josh Allen, and CJ Stroud. And I think Drake May hopefully can get into that tier of guys as well. But let's talk through 3 guys I think that are firmly leaving quarterback wilderness. That is Brock Bowers, and I guess we could say Jacoby Myers of the Las Vegas Raiders, who are getting Geno Smith. There's some connective tissue between some of the players we're talking about here. There's George Pickens, who is leaving the Pittsburgh Steelers, going to the Dallas Cowboys. And then there's Davante Adams, who is leaving Aaron Rodgers and whatever the hell's going on with the Jets. And like I said, if Rodgers, to me, is below the line we're looking for, Matthew Stafford is certainly above the line. So let's start with Brock Bowers, who was the runaway tight end one last year. He's being drafted as such this year, and is certainly getting a pretty considerable quarterback upgrade. Whatever you think of Geno Smith, big quarterback upgrade there for the Raiders.
Yeah, it's a huge upgrade for Brock Bowers, for the Raiders. Geno was, and I think just continues to be every year, a top 12 fantasy quarterback. And he's also just good for actual NFL football. Okay. Like I want that to be said as well. He's a very underrated passer. And I think a lot of us just still think of the old Geno Smith that fizzled out in New York. But I think this could actually still be very good for Brock Bowers. And it's not just that he's like, not just that he gets Geno Smith, but that he's also got a new offensive coordinator. And Chip Kelly is all about using tight ends, however and whenever he can. And we saw him do that when he was in Philly. He's had other stops where he hasn't really had the opportunity to do so, but even go to like UCLA, Greg Dulcich was running around making crazy plays. And it's like, if he can do that with Dulcich, like I'm really excited to see what he can do with Brock Bowers, because this also just isn't a traditional tight end. We can't look at him like that. So I think a lot of people are going to say, well, you got Ashton Jinty there, and they're going to commit to the run, and they drafted Jack Besh, which, by the way, that's my baby boy Besh. Like I love him. I think he's going to do great in this opportunity, and Jacoby Myers is still going to catch passes. So maybe some of the targets go down, the target volume goes down, but I think the efficiency and the option to score is now actually present within this offense, and I just don't think it was there last year.
Yeah, I think in the fantasy community, we just obsess over the raw target totals, and we want that to be, 130 plus. And it's just tough for a tight end to command 130 plus targets on an annual basis, especially when you do have look, they were 28th in EPA per dropback last year with the Raiders. That efficiency going up and the touchdown opportunities going up is much more critical to me than the question of, can Brock Bowers get targeted 130, 140 times in a season? And I think that is the case, especially with the guy in Geno Smith that I'm with you is good for NFL football. He's highly accurate. He works well over the middle of the field. And you just look at these guys on this offense right now. It's Bowers, it's Jacoby Myers, it's Jack Besh. These are three like middle of the field demons. I mean, get ready to learn throw and mesh concepts, Geno Smith, because I think we're going to see a lot of them in this offense. But to me, that's exciting. I don't know if I'm going to end up being somebody that's heavily invested in Brock Bowers this year, and like don't clip that for social and be like, I'm not Harmon's fading Brock Bowers. It's just like where he goes in drafts and typically how I prefer to build teams. But I can't argue with where he is being ranked across the industry right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, I think he's got to be tight end one. You can make arguments for some of these other guys, but I don't know that he's the guy I'm going to go out of my way to make sure like I've got to get him in fantasy drafts. It's going to be if like, does he fall to the right spot for me in the right round at the right ADP? That's what I'm going to need if I'm going to be taking Brock Bowers, especially with just so many new moving pieces. It can be good, but with enough moving pieces, I don't want to invest a top 2 pick on my team in that player.
Right. That's the thing. You're going to have to take him in the second round. Like consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros right now, he is the overall 17th player, off the board. So, I don't think that's bad. I'm perfectly comfortable with ranking him in that range. It's just, and if somebody takes him there, I'm not gonna be like, there's the fish, there's the idiot. It's just, to me, I'm probably going to end up taking one of the running backs or one of the wide receivers that go in that range. But one wide receiver is not going to go in that range, but I do think clearly is out of quarterback wilderness is George Pickens. George Pickens going to Dallas. I don't think we need to explain this much that, again, whatever you think about Dak Prescott, the guy is clearly above board when we're talking about quarterback wilderness, and he's absolutely better than anything that George Pickens was dealing with in Pittsburgh, Alfredo.
Yeah, this is such a not only good NFL move, but it is a good fantasy move. Now, I'm not saying I've got to go and get as much George Pickens as possible. I just think the Cowboys are finally doing what they've wanted to do when they had Michael Gallup on the roster, when they went out and got Brandon Cooks, and he wasn't the same version of Brandon Cooks that they always wanted. Like, this is kind of what they've been imagining doing for years and years and years, which is just getting a guy who can be a field stretcher and go and win contested catches. Not that CeeDee Lamb can't do those things, but they like to use him in a way, a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, get those intermediate routes. And then when they got into the red zone, a lot of it was targeting Jake Ferguson. And it's just like, well, if that's going to be your bread and butter near the goal line, defenses are going to be able to stop you. So I think there's still a big ceiling here for George Pickens in Dallas. I think the floor now feels a little bit more secure. It doesn't feel like it falls out from underneath him like in Pittsburgh. But in terms of fantasy, it does still feel like a really lateral move. It's going to be kind of similar to the same things I said with Brock Bowers. Maybe it's less volume, but it's more efficiency. It's more scoring opportunity. It's a better quarterback play. I think is just the easiest thing to look at. But there's other guys that I'd rank probably similarly that I'd rather take in drafts, like some of the guys we talked about earlier, Olave, Diggs, even probably like Roma Dunze. I'm taking over George Pickens in drafts.
Yeah, just looking where I have Pickens right now, I'm probably with you on some of those names there. Certainly Roma Dunze, Chris Olave, I think. Diggs, I think, is interesting. It sounds like, and look, all the evidence that you see on social media, it sounds like Diggs is pretty healthy, and I think we can kind of stop saying, well, when he's on the field. Like, at this point, I'd be shocked if he wasn't out there in week 1. So he's somebody that I do think we need to kind of start bumping up a little bit. But Pickens, like where we have him ranked in terms of our consensus Yahoo rankings at wide receiver 30, 34, 35. That's fine. It's just like I look at all of these guys here, and I can make a case of any of these players from Jordan Addison all the way down to Jacoby Myers with George Pickens in the middle there having like a really, really good season or having really good weeks. So it's just, to me, there's not one in here that really I got to get this guy. I just think this is a good range to draft some wide receivers this year.
Yeah, I don't think any of these guys you're banging the table for, but George Pickens, I think it's going to be probably a little bit more of the same with some higher boom weeks and some higher bad weeks. Like, that's just really it. The floor just moves up a little bit.
All right, last guy that I think is leaving quarterback wilderness definitively is Davante Adams, who's going to the Los Angeles Rams. Like I said, to me, I'm skeptical that Rodgers is a needle mover. And that was only like what I'd call like a brief respite from quarterback wilderness when he was with the Raiders. I mean, we've all seen how Davante Adams felt playing with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like we understand that situation there. So certainly has been in the wilderness for most of his time in Las Vegas. I don't think his tenure with Rodgers was all that great from Rodgers' perspective. But he's definitely going to a Rams team that, look, do you tell me if you disagree with this? I think Stafford had his worst season in Los Angeles last year, but he was still 14th in adjusted yards per like throw out the 22 season, which was just a nightmare for the whole team. But he was 14th in adjusted yards per attempt, and I still think that when Stafford is protected and he has multiple options out in the route, he could go white hot and go on a tear. So I think this is a very big win for Davante Adams going to Los Angeles.
Yeah, and I mean, the context needs to be there too on how Stafford had struggles, which was didn't really have Cooper Kupp all the time, or he didn't have a healthy Cooper Kupp all the time. He's out here making plays with Tutu Atwell. I think Davante Adams becomes a guy that I'm not just happy about this landing spot. I'm actually kind of excited. I don't think I'll overdraft him in fantasy drafts, but I'm actually legit excited where if there's something we can get that is a semblance of what we used to have with Cooper Kupp, where we're saying, man, got to draft that guy in round 1. Maybe I'm not doing that with Davante Adams, but
sure,
if I can get similar production at a discount where maybe I'm going into a fantasy draft and I'm getting him in the 3rd round, 4th round, let's say, and he's giving me that top 12 wide receiver production, I'm really, really happy with that, because I think there's just going to be a lot of people that go into a fantasy draft and see, oh, Davante Adams, yeah, he's been all over the place. I think he's washed, and not really getting that context of where he is in his career, so many people just get into that, right? Where they say, oh yeah, the Jets, they sucked last year. He wasn't that great with Aaron Rodgers last year. When in reality, Davante Adams is still really, really good at this. Is really, an awesome really good, scenario for him to be in Los Angeles.
100%. Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with where he goes. Wide receiver 17 in our rankings. I'm okay with that as well. Any other names you think I left out in terms of they are verifiably leaving quarterback wilderness? I struggled to kind of come up with any.
Elijah Moore? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that to you.
Somebody tweeted me today that he was Josh Allen's favorite target in OTAs. So we are very much back. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of that.
Yeah, no, I think we'll get a lot of that. Just like I got a lot of those tweets about Curtis Samuel last year, and that didn't really go so well. So we'll see what happens there. But all right, we're going to take our first break. We come back. We're going to talk through the guys that are still wandering the quarterback wilderness right after this. All right, we are back. Let's talk through 4-ish players that I think are still wandering quarterback wilderness, Alfredo. That is Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets, Jerry Jeudy of the Cleveland Browns, the Colts pass catchers. I mean, that just all of them. Mainly Michael Pittman and Josh
as
Downs,
a person, altogether.
Just as one collective person. Yes. And then Malik Nabers of the New York Giants. any of these that you think have, like, okay, I'll just throw all of those four-ish players at you. Which one of them do you think you could be most convinced by the end of the year is no longer in quarterback wilderness?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I could be if I have to pick one, it's basically the Bear Grylls of this whole experience. Garrett Wilson, who has just been in
Mm,
quarterback wilderness every season of his career. I'm not one of these Justin Fields truthers. Like I thought he was a good prospect coming out, but we've just kind of seen that Garrett Wilson can still produce. I don't want to say regardless of who's at quarterback, but he's been in some pretty bad situations and he's just so talented. Whereas like I know there's some other guys that you mentioned, like Malik Nabers, for example, is very, very talented. I'm very worried about that ecosystem in New York. Like, I don't know that Jackson Dart ends up playing more than 8 games as a rookie because they're going to do the whole Russell Wilson thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Jameis gets a couple of starts. And then they lose Brian Daboll, most likely, because they have another bad season. And you got to start all over with a new coaching staff. So it's just like, even though I love Malik Nabers and he's fantastic, I don't think he's out of that wilderness. Garrett Wilson, I think, is the one that's probably closest to being out of the wilderness here because if things work out with Justin Fields, you've got a guy who has created and not created, but he's helped produce a top 12 fantasy wide receiver in DJ Moore back in Chicago. He's got the experience with Garrett Wilson. It could be one of these things that just happened to work out. I'm actually most excited about, I mentioned ecosystem. It's the actual offensive system around him. And the new offensive coordinator is, I want to say the name right. It's Tanner Engstrand coming in
yep.
from Detroit. And what they did in Detroit was a lot of us think of Amon-Ra St. Brown as being just a slot only guy. And all these players moved around a lot. Like, for example, we had Jameson Williams in the slot 35% of the time, and Amon-Ra was there 52% of the time. Garrett Wilson last year was in the slot 30% of the time. I'm excited to see how they actually just move him around and get him into creative positions, get him into better spots where he can not only just get open, but catch the ball and run in space. That's just something like the New York Jets offense has not been fun or creative to watch for years. Get him moving around prior to the snap. That's what I really want to see for Garrett Wilson because he's so damn good and we just have not gotten that. So for me, it's a little bit of the quarterback thing, but it's a lot of the offensive ecosystem.
Yeah, so many good points there. A lot of threads to pull on. Number one, the fact that you highlighted, hey, wasn't just Amon-Ra St. Brown that was the slot receiver. I think is instructive for those Bears pass catchers with Ben Johnson now that
Right.
everybody's going to get some slot opportunities, which is good because I think all those guys could be useful to varying degrees in the slot. But particularly with Garrett Wilson, I think what goes a little undersold about his season last year in terms of just the weirdness of it all, which is strange to say because I think we all know that the Jets had a weird season last year. But like when he was originally like without Davante Adams on the team, he was mostly just kind of the static X receiver, and he has been ever
Yeah.
since Nathaniel Hackett took over there because that's a pretty, which is what, because this is what Rodgers wants. He wants a rather traditional, like kind of static offense where the number one read in the concept is for the most part an X receiver, which is almost the complete opposite of what they did in Detroit. And I don't really know how much Tanner Engstrand is going to bring from Detroit to New York because you just look at the players and it's very different, right? I mean, they certainly look like they're going to be run heavy, which obviously the Lions leaned on the run as well. But yeah, that's a good point that I hadn't really considered because this is another guy, Garrett Wilson, I absolutely love. Like these 2022 receivers, Drake London, who's going to come up in a little bit, Chris Olave, who we already talked about, Garrett Wilson. Like these guys are so good. Even Jameson Williams. Like, and I think the perceived gap in like the dynasty community between how good some of the last year's rookies are to like these guys is too big. Like I think these guys are all very tight in terms of talent. I just think these 22 guys have just gotten really unlucky. So I'm trying to not sell myself a story about how, oh yeah, DJ Moore season, like that's what's coming down the line for Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson. You are not helping the situation, Alfredo, because you made a lot of really good points about how he can be deployed in this offense. So I'm just trying, like, how instructive do we think that DJ Moore season with Justin Fields is in this situation?
I mean, I'm kind of like you. I don't want to get too excited, and I don't necessarily think that Garrett Wilson is going to get pushed too high up draft boards. But when I was looking at the Jets offense and going, okay, who's going to be number 2 in targets? Is it Mason Taylor? Is it really going to be the
Yeah.
rookie tight end who's like, I don't know. I really don't know the way that this whole target tree is going to pan out. They could be getting a lot of passes to the running back, which was not really something Fields did until he got to Pittsburgh. So yeah, like I think it's more probable than not that Garrett Wilson actually ends up having a DJ Moore-esque season. Now, I don't want to reach for him. I don't want to get over my skis and say like
Sure.
I'm getting this guy around earlier than everyone else, but I think there's going to be, it's a lot of that, perception is reality thing is like, oh, well, Garrett Wilson's not good because the Jets haven't been good. And I keep drafting him higher and he keeps performing lower. Whereas I think now it's going to be the Goldilocks thing where it's like the ADP is going to be just right based on the production we could be getting from him. And we could actually end up with a lot more production than we expect.
It is a little, I mean, wide receiver 17 in consensus rankings right now is, I'm not going to say it's aggressive. It's certainly less aggressive than it was the last couple of seasons, but to me,
Yeah.
I just feel like you're kind of hitting it close to the ceiling overall here. So, yeah, I think with Wilson, we're looking at a pretty good spot for him to go here. I just think Fields has to play a lot better than he has for him to truly get out of the wilderness, if that makes sense. Because Fields at this point still career-long kind of sack issue, which has really been debilitating and like robotic style of play. So, in order for him to be out of the wilderness, I think Fields just has to play better than even that one season with DJ Moore, which the Bears summarily moved on from Fields after that. Unique opportunity, unique situation, but nevertheless, still we're pretty happy to move on from him. I want to go to Malik Nabers here because I would have actually said that if you gave me odds, I think he should be the favorite to, by the end of the season, like he's out of quarterback wilderness. But that's not really my evaluation on Jaxson Dart. It's just the simple fact that he's a first round rookie, whereas all these other guys are dealing with journeymen or players that have already kind of proven themselves to maybe not be above board like the Colts players. So do you have any faith that Jaxson Dart could be like a guy to get Malik Nabers out of the quarterback wilderness? Because the only thing I disagree with you that you said was I think Jaxson Dart ends up starting like 10 plus games this year, just because this team needs to, they need to get him on the field. And like, I think he probably does need a season of development, but they're trying to sell hope. They're trying to sell hope and cope in terms of keeping their jobs. That's going to involve Jaxson Dart getting on the field and like throwing some deep in breakers to Malik Nabers, which Russell Wilson is not going to do.
Yeah, what worries me is that if Russell Wilson is named the starter for week 1 and that Giants team is like 4-1 after the first 5 weeks, that leash gets a little bit longer for Russell Wilson because you've got not only a head coach, but a GM that really, really need to have success this year if they want to keep their jobs. Because, I mean, Joe Schoen, he's been actually making some nice draft picks here and there, but I think that everyone's just going to remember them for the Saquon Barkley debacle and the whole like offseason hard knocks thing. And they've made some good picks though, but you can only go so long without making the playoffs, without being a winning team before like dudes just get fired. It happens all the time. Even if you're good at your job, like people just get fired. So that's the only thing that worries me is that if Russell Wilson has a semblance of what he was able to do last year in Pittsburgh, where the team is winning and they look competent, you might get a Brian Dable that's like, we're developing Jaxson Dart behind the scenes. He's got it. He's learning by holding this clipboard. He's going to get it. And that's kind of what worries me is Jaxson Dart does need to get on the field if he's going to get better because he's a spray and pray quarterback. He's been gotten used to that one read type of stuff that he's done at Ole Miss. And it's just, I've never been a fan of those kind of offenses like the Ole Miss and the Tennessee offenses and how it translates to the NFL. So for him, it's kind of like the Anthony Richardson debacle. Get these guys on the field and they'll get better. I just don't know that he'll get that opportunity. But I mean, we'll wait and see.
Here's again just where most of my pushback to this lies. Like you said, Russell Wilson playing to a level where the team is winning games. Giants have a brutal schedule, man. Just first fair. 8 weeks of the season. Shoot, just even the first 4 weeks. They're in Washington, then they're in Dallas, then they get the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Saints, the Eagles in Denver, and then the Eagles again in Philadelphia in week 8. I mean, how many
All right,
wins?
Jaxson start. Jaxson Dart is starting week 9. There we go. All right. We're there. Never mind. Take it all back.
I said this on football. Yeah, I think I said this on Football 301 or shoot, it might have been this show. I don't know. I talk a lot. That week 6 game for the Giants it's in New York, but it's Philadelphia. It's on Thursday Night Football. that like sort of mini bye afterwards going into weeks. I mean, it's tough. Like we're going to throw Jaxson Dart his first career start out in Denver against the Broncos defense. That's tough, but we saw the Patriots do that. Like sometimes you just got to get the young guy on the field. The Patriots did that last year. They started him against the Texans, and he survived. He's still a living, breathing human being among us. So I think that's the one spot that's on my radar. But I certainly think, to your point, if you asked Brian Daboll, when do we want to start Jaxson Dart, it's much later in the season than week 7 against the damn Broncos. But we'll see. Any thoughts on Jerry Jeudy with the Browns or the Colts collection of pass catchers? I don't think you can tell me you'd be a hell of a salesman if you could tell me a story that somebody from the Cleveland Browns is getting Jerry Jeudy out of the quarterback wilderness. That would be a hell of a sale case. But do you have any optimism?
Arch Manning in 2025, 2026. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So yeah, it might be yet another, and it's been a long stint of guys in the quarterback. I've been lower on Jerry Jeudy at times during his career, but I think the Browns used him really well, and there's no question that he has been really just parked in quarterback wilderness throughout the course of his career. He had a nice like little moment there with the Jameis Winston pump and dump scam, but that's pretty much it. Any hope for the Colts guys? I don't know your thoughts on Daniel Jones or like where you're at with Anthony Richardson at this point, but to me, I don't know that either of those guys are getting them out of the quarterback wilderness either.
No, I don't think so. And I'm rooting for Anthony Richardson to be a success in the NFL because it's so much fun for fantasy. But we haven't seen anything that shows that he's an NFL caliber quarterback, and they've got to keep a long leash with him and let him develop. And I don't know if the Colts are willing to do that. And I think the signing of Daniel Jones says that as well. Listen, I'm a big Josh Downs fan. I'm like, there's no slot shaming for me. I'm always down for Downs. He's a great player. I think if Daniel Jones is starting, there's some slot affinity that he has, and that could be good for Josh Downs. But I don't know that I am overtly targeting any of these Colts pass catchers in fantasy drafts. Like, I'm not going to feel comfortable having to start them as a wide receiver 3, even in fantasy. Like, I'm not seeing the upside, especially in that offense with those passers there. So no, I don't think the Colts pass catchers are going to be out of the wilderness whatsoever.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page with this one because I'm also a big Josh Downs fan. And when Daniel Jones signed there, I am disgusted that I thought this, but it certainly crossed my mind of like, ooh, are we about to get like a little Wan'Dale Robinson PPR scam out of Josh Downs? Gross. No, I don't even want to put those two guys in the same sentence, and I don't want to put that on Josh Downs because he's so much better than being like a little slot scammer production guy. He's a real deal. I think closer to like Tyler Lockett as a wide receiver than your typical pop gun slot receiver, but that was my first thought, and that's what you do when you're in quarterback wilderness. You start coping with little things like that, because I think the only way that these guys can get out of it is if Anthony Richardson just completely reverses course and he looks like something closer to what we hoped he would be coming into the NFL. But yeah, I'm with you. Very skeptical that the Colts are going to give him that leash. Do you have any optimism for any of the non-Downs guys? Because I've clicked him a couple times in like round 11, but where are you at with Michael Pittman, where he's at is this point in his career? You know, Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell, is that just going to still be like a weird rotation at the X receiver spot? Tyler Warren. That's another problem here. So many guys in this offense, despite the fact that they don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, that's it. And like, I'm rooting for guys like A.D. Mitchell. Like, I think he's actually a pretty good wide receiver. But like you said, there's just a big rotation here of like, Alec Pierce isn't a bad wide receiver either. Oh, by the way, we've got Tyler Warren, who might end up taking away all the easy targets that some of these other guys could have gotten. So it's just, man, I don't see that there's any one of these guys that really stands out, or just like a cream that rises to the top amongst these guys. It would take a lot of injuries for us to go, okay, cool, this guy's getting a bunch of targets this week, or this guy is now the focal point of the offense. Like, I just don't know that it happens. Josh Downs and Michael Pittman are essentially the same guy at this point, despite doing totally different things in the field. Their fantasy numbers kind of say the same thing. So I don't know that I want anyone from this offense, maybe just Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. It is a messy situation there in Indianapolis.
It's depressing.
All right. It is depressing. Quarterback wilderness.
I felt dirty after saying
that. Yeah, it's a depressing episode, but we get to maybe change into some optimism here in our third segment. The fork in the road players. These guys might have a path out of quarterback wilderness. We are going to get to that right after our final break. All right, we are back. Alfredo, this is the fun part. This is segment number 3, the fork in the road in quarterback wilderness. One path could lead these guys out. The other, it's just a little circle right back into where you started. You're still squarely in quarterback wilderness. I came up with 5 situations here. Calvin Ridley, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Drake London, and I guess Darnold Mooney would be in this as well. DJ Moore, and we could also say Roma Dunze's in this, but it's a little early in his career. DJ Moore is definitely he's been the king of quarterback wilderness. He's definitely one of these players as well. And then Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in the Minnesota Vikings. Like, if you're seeing a theme here, it's a lot of young. We don't know who these guys are just yet, especially with Calvin Ridley, who has a rookie quarterback. I am of the opinion that I think Cam Ward is going to be a guy, Alfredo, who's going to be above the mark that we're looking for in terms of quarterback wilderness. And unlike with Malik Nabers in New York, there's no, hey, we got to have Russell Wilson start a couple months of the season because we paid him some money and we're trying to do, like, I know that they have Cam Ward in a quarterback battle with Will Levis right now in OTAs. Okay, Cam Ward's going to start all season, and I do think he will be above the line we're looking for, but that's my opinion. I don't know that for sure, which is why he has to fit into this segment.
That quarterback battle thing with Will Levis, that was a written statement, right? Like that's how that was released. That wasn't something that was said with a straight face. Okay. All right. Just wanted to check. Because I'm with you. Like, I think Cam Ward's actually pretty good. I know that the Titans themselves are not very good, but that probably just means we're going to see a lot of passing from Cam Ward. It's an offensive line that has improved, and they've added some pieces around, but Calvin Ridley is still very much the guy. I mean, you're looking at the depth chart, and it's Van Jefferson and Tyler Lockett, and I like Lockett, but I think Calvin Ridley still ends up being the top target on this team. And he's there's a similar vibe to like Chris Olave, where it's a guy that's just been kind of in I don't want to say quarterback purgatory, but I guess the quarterback wilderness, properly named this episode here, where it's like he's been used as sort of this field stretcher. He's been overutilized as that to this point that's become his identity, when Calvin Ridley can actually do a bit more than that. But it works with Cam Ward because he's a super confident quarterback. He'll rip it deep. He did that a lot with Kyle Williams. He tried to do that a lot at the University of Miami, where they just put out a bunch of like skinny, tall guys. They were like, hey, go to the outside. You guys are just going to run go routes. Elijah Arroyo, we're going to have you run around here. And then Xavier Restrepo, you're going to catch slants. Like, that's basically what we're doing. And he's done that with Kyle Williams, another guy, Washington State. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we actually get a pretty decent year from Calvin Ridley, and he surprises people. And I think a lot of people are going to be very averse to drafting Calvin Ridley in fantasy drafts because of the whole rookie quarterback thing.
I'm with you on this. And Calvin Ridley, I think people don't realize he was 8th in terms of yards per route run against man coverage last year, dealing with that quarterback situation. So he can still certainly be a productive receiver in the NFL. And I think he's actually going in a really great range. We have him ranked in wide receiver 33 in our Yahoo consensus rankings. He's actually going a little bit later than that in drafts right now, and certainly someone that I could see out kicking. Like, he's probably in this range of guys, he's probably the most boring. He's probably the most veteran of this name that we're showing on the screen right now, because he's in the Roma Dunze alley. We talked about George Pickens earlier. Jordan Addison's coming off a nice year. McMillan's a rookie, but I could certainly see him being the most productive guy here if Cam Ward is good. And that if is just why he is involved in this segment. But right, I'll ask you about Jaxon Smith-Njigba next, because again, he is someone that, like, if he's losing Geno Smith, who, as we said in the first segment, is certainly above the line that we're looking for in terms of quarterback wilderness. If you just look at who Sam Darnold was last year from a production standpoint, was 7th in adjusted yards per attempt. He's 16th in EPA per dropback. Not perfect, but definitely above the line. But that was in Minnesota's ecosystem. How much faith do we have that Darnold in what's going on in Seattle right now is going to be good enough to get Jaxon Smith-Njigba to keep him out of the quarterback wilderness?
I think once the genie's out of the bottle, you as an offensive coordinator and as a coach, you are doing your players a disservice if you don't take what worked for that player and make it work again for you. Like, if you go out of your way to sign Sam Darnold, you have to have a plan in there. And I mean, Sam Darnold, he was part of the 49ers and that Shanahan style offense for just, I mean, it was a little bit, he had a cup of coffee there, but he gets a lot of the same concepts. And for Jaxon Smith-Njigba, I really do think, for as much as we hear that they're going to be a ground and pound, run the ball team, I'm sure they will. That's fine. But no DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett. You get sort of the elder statesman Cooper Kupp, who hasn't really been the same. He doesn't really stay healthy. Jaxon Smith-Njigba might actually be the straw that stirs the drink for the Seahawks, and probably should be as their best offensive player. We finally saw the usage that mirrored what he did at Ohio State, where he was getting targeted a little bit deeper downfield. It was like he stopped being this weird screen guy that they were doing in his rookie season, and it's just it was so frustrating to see that the first year. But now I think we have a guy who is not only going to be a big play guy in this offense, but he's also probably just going to keep being the volume guy. So for him, it's a little loaded to say that he might be wilderness proof here, but I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba ends up just staying a really good fantasy football wide receiver and a good NFL wide receiver as well. He's going to get moved around a lot in pre-snap motion. They're going to be using play action to open things up in the Kubiak offense, which is honestly, that's going to get some big plays out of JSN deep. And that's what worked so well for Sam Darnold last year. So yeah, he also didn't score a lot of touchdowns last year, by the way. So only 6 touchdowns for JSN. So if there's some variance, that number goes up, it can make up for maybe any lack of volume that we get. But I think we're still going to get volume and we're going to get explosive plays from him.
He's probably like the top of, the third tier in terms of wide receivers right now, because I don't think he's quite in the AJ Brown, Drake London. I think Ladd McConkey's in that tier, and I think like JSN kind of starts the next group of guys. But I'm really in on where he's going. I'm really in on drafting him, and you made a lot of good points there. First of all, we just overstate like who's the slot, who's the outside receiver in this offense because it's so condensed anyways. And yeah, I'm actually in the middle of charting JSN for reception perception right now. He was so good against man coverage last year. I'm not concerned about him taking more snaps outside. And yeah, it was great to see him actually used in that intermediate area, because that's where he's really dangerous. I don't need to be like the 10th person this week to say something mean about Shane Waldron, but it was just crazy to see him used as a screen guy when he's not even a tackle breaker. Like he's not a guy that breaks a lot of tackles anyways. It's not that he's bad after the catch, but he's just not that type of like physical presence, nor is he all that explosive with the ball in his hands. He's more of an explosive separator. So I love the way he's going to be used this year. It just, when it comes down to quarterback wilderness, it's just, who is Sam Darnold going to be outside of that Minnesota ecosystem? Is he still somebody that maybe he's not 7th in adjusted yards per attempt? He's not this great downfield passer, but shoot, if he can still be 14, 15, 16 type range, I think that's good enough for where JSN is going. I want to talk Drake London with you next, because this is a guy who has not been in the NFL very long, but much like Garrett Wilson, much like Chris Olave from his own draft class, certainly at least with Garrett Wilson, he's been wandering quarterback wilderness for a minute here now. We thought that it might be Kirk Cousins to get him out. It wasn't. But will Michael Penix be that guy? It wasn't a perfect audition for Penix last year, 56% completion rate, but certainly there were some high highs, particularly when he was throwing to this guy right here, Drake London.
Yeah, I mean, there was a massive performance. What was that, week 18, where we kind of got to see what the ceiling can be for Drake London. And if we can, I mean, when you draft players in fantasy football, especially early, you're saying, what's their ceiling? Is this guy a top 12 wide receiver, or could he actually be a top 5, top 3 wide receiver 1 overall? A lot of that is going to hinge on whether or not Michael Penix is actually good at football, which we still don't know yet. Early signs point to Drake London could just continue to have this good role where he is a target hog. And listen, anything is going to be better than what we were getting last year from Kirk Cousins. And it feels like we say that every year with the Falcons. Well, anything could be better now with this new quarterback coming in. But it actually feels real. Like it feels like we're still waiting on the Kyle Pitts breakout, and we're getting all these weird reports that he's got to work on a lot of stuff. And it's just like it. And somehow he's progressively getting younger at the same time. Like, I don't know, but I think there's Drake London should be firmly in that top 12, probably at like number 12. But I think that's where he's going to stay, even with Michael Penix there, just because the volume is going to be too big to ignore.
I think I'm going to end up coming in a little higher than 12 on Drake London. I think he's, it's so tough because we just broke down the second year quarterbacks on Football 301 last week, and Falcons fans, I guess, were not happy with our Michael Penix evaluation, which basically hinged, and I actually think it's perfectly encapsulated by by their production and their kind of connection, Drake London and Michael Penix, on out routes. According to Fantasy Points data, he was 11 of 15 on out routes last year, Michael Penix, in the 3 games. And my point on that is some of those completions were like the best throws you'll see all year. Like out routes to Drake London, Michael Penix was just nailing them. They're making these big plays. He's putting it up for Michael Penix put it up for Drake London to go get it. Drake London is separating extremely well. Those 3 misses were like some of the worst misses you'll ever see. Like that's where Michael Penix is right now. He's a high variance quarterback, but that's him as a rookie. If they can, and again, we're hyper focusing on one route, but I think that's generally where he is right now. The highs are very high. The lows were pretty low. If they can just get that floor to come up a little bit with a full off season of being the guy, taking some conceptual stuff from what worked last year under Zach Robinson, who I think did pretty well as the offensive coordinator, and pushing that along, like we can get Michael Penix to an area where Drake London, I think he has wide receiver 1 overall in his range of outcomes. I'm not ranking him that way. I'm not going to, say like, right, that's not, he's going to do that. But I do think that is within his range of outcomes because he is that good of a player and I do think Penix, again, the ceiling moments are good enough for him to get pushed into that range if the floor can come up as well.
Yeah, it's funny as you say that you can see him being wide receiver 1 overall. I kind of look at Drake London being another guy that's like a Puka Nacua, like a CeeDee Lamb, one of these guys that can just thrive off of volume. And if Michael Penix is anything like their quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford and Dak Prescott, I mean, he doesn't have to be, those are both very good quarterbacks, but what I'm getting at is that he doesn't necessarily have to be this incredible world beater, this Pro Bowler here in year 2 for Drake London to actually be good for fantasy. It's just the volume alone, and Drake London's talent as well is good, actually elevate him to being a top 5, top 10 guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, I love Drake London and I really want some good things for him this year. Let's talk DJ Moore, and, we could talk Bears guys as a whole, but I think Moore is the more interesting one to talk about when it comes to quarterback wilderness because he's just been in quarterback wilderness his whole career, pretty much his entire career. And I think, look, Caleb Williams, I have a lot of optimism about Caleb Williams going into his second season, but we have not seen him be that guy. And if you're just looking at last year's results, Caleb Williams definitely wasn't that guy. How optimistic are you about the Bears offense as a whole, but specifically Caleb Williams being a guy who can get DJ Moore out of quarterback wilderness in 2025, and the Bears are hoping beyond that?
I'm very optimistic if we're talking about Caleb being able to get DJ Moore out of quarterback wilderness. I'm worried that maybe DJ Moore doesn't get himself out of quarterback wilderness. Like, let's just see how everybody meshes here on the Bears. It's one of these things like you show, you don't tell. And the Bears showed us their hand when they're like, all right, let's get Colson Loveland. All right, let's get Luther Burden. And they kind of just kept adding all these weapons here. They didn't add anything in the backfield, really, outside of Kyle Monungai. It seems like they want to pass the ball with the Ben Johnson offense. It's going to be a lot of pre-snap motion. It's going to be a lot of players lining up in different spots. I remember being there and watching the draft and seeing Colson Loveland. I'm like, ooh, that's cool because he can play in the slot. And then Luther Burden gets picked, and I'm like, ooh, that's cool because he can play in the slot. And I'm like, they have DJ Moore. That's cool. He can play in the slot. And I just kept saying the same thing over and over. So it's an exciting offense. And I think as long as this is such a cop-out answer, but I think as long as all the intangible stuff goes right with DJ Moore, he can absolutely be out of the quarterback wilderness. Now, does that necessarily mean he's going to be giving us that top 10 production like maybe he's been able to do in the past? Maybe not, but he can still be really good for fantasy, and this Bears offense can be really good as a whole because I see Caleb Williams as a guy that he can go ahead and sustain if he's playing at his best. And with his pedigree, he could sustain 2 or 3 top flight pass catchers in fantasy. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a really successful Ben Johnson offense. But if everything goes well, there's plenty of guys in this offense that can be really good for fantasy.
Such good points there. And like you basically took the words out of my mouth from the article, which is like, I'm pretty confident that Caleb Williams is going to end up being someone who who can get the Bears as a whole out of the wilderness. It's just up to DJ Moore to play better in isolation than he did last year, because that's the thing. Like, for everything that has been not DJ Moore's fault throughout the course of his career, there was a lot last season that, whether it was outside variables or whatever, he let it leak onto the field, and it became partially his fault what went wrong last year. Not just entirely his fault, but he's got to own a big chunk of how that went last year. And where I've just been suspicious is the fantasy community's sort of insistence based on just Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. Like, DJ Moore is the 41st player off in consensus rankings right now, and the next one doesn't come around until Rome Odunze at the 81st overall player. Like, and look, I am completely compromised in this because I'm a fan of Rome Odunze. I think he played really well last year in isolation. I was very, very high on him as a prospect. That not that he was perfect last year, but I think he played much better than the stats indicate. But I think he's got a pretty secure role as the team's X receiver. It's sort of that, as you mentioned, this guy's in the slot. This guy can be a flanker. That's where it sort of gets blurry there. So it's more, weirdly, for the first time in his career, even though we haven't seen it with Caleb Williams yet, I actually have more questions about DJ himself than necessarily where the quarterback's going to be by the end of the year.
Yeah, man. And you mentioned Rome Odunze. Like, I'm actually pretty excited about him, especially at cost. This is a guy that was really good coming out of Washington. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are just sort of down on him after, I mean, the same way that people are down on Marvin Harrison Jr. too, where it's like, 900 yards and what he did last year is not a good rookie season. Cool. I'll take the discount on those guys in drafts. And Rome Odunze is one of those guys I'm excited to take a discount on and see how low I can actually get him in fantasy drafts. DJ Moore, while I think he can have a good season and the potential's there, especially for the Bears offense, I don't know that I want to get him at his current cost. These are fourth round is where DJ Moore is going?
Yeah. We have him in our consensus ranks at like wide receiver 19.
Okay.
Fantasy consensus ranks wide receiver 19. Like, that's still, again, it's a big gap between him and everybody else. And I do think like the floor is a little lower than maybe some of these other players that, like Terry McLaurin, Davante Adams, that he's ranked around. That's just my issue with Moore.
Yeah.
All right, last group of players that we have to talk about here. And again, like I mean it, we have to talk about them because I'm not worried about the Minnesota Vikings offense because Kevin O'Connell and this ecosystem they deserve the benefit of the doubt. They deserve the faith that they've earned so far. But it would be disingenuous to say, hey, we got to put Drake London on here because we haven't seen Michael Penix prove it yet. Hey, we got to talk about Jaxon Smith-Njigba and with the recognition that Sam Darnold was one of the most productive quarterbacks in the NFL last year. The Vikings are losing one of the most productive quarterbacks in the NFL last year. And I'm saying productive, not one of the best, one of the most productive quarterbacks in the NFL last year. And they're starting a guy who we have never seen play in the NFL before. So Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison have to be discussed in this exercise. But are you actually worried at all? Like, is there a large percentage of you that's worried about what might happen this season with JJ McCarthy entering the mix here?
Large percentage, no. Justin Jefferson, I think, is kind of quarterback proof at this point, and we can just say that going into every season, and I won't entertain the debates otherwise, honestly. But I think my favorite quote that I've heard about this Vikings offense and JJ McCarthy stepping in is that it's like giving a Ferrari or a Lamborghini to a 16-year-old first-time driver. And with his experience at Michigan, like, it kind of feels that way a little bit with JJ McCarthy. And I think it's less about JJ McCarthy. That does worry me. I think it's a little bit more about the production profile we've seen from Jordan Addison, who I don't think is a bad player by any means. It's the volatility that we've had from him. And I think I'm just going to end up being lower on him than consensus because he's just never been this volume guy. He's averaging around 66 catches a season. And I was doing a study on him, and just over the last 3 seasons, only 18% of wide receivers finish as top 24 wide receivers when they have those kind of reception numbers. And it's usually guys that are crazy outliers, like Deebo Samuel getting a bunch of rushing touchdowns, Jameson Williams with his 18.5 yards per reception, T. Higgins with a 14.4% touchdown rate. These are guys that are doing things that are out of the norm. Jordan Addison, yeah, he can score touchdowns. I don't know if there's going to be that many touchdowns scored through the air in this offense this year coming from Jordan Addison. I think that he might be third on the pecking order in that hierarchy because you also have to remember a lot of the times that he's had these very productive games have been when TJ Hawkinson is out or Justin
Yeah.
Jefferson is out. Now, if everything goes right for the Vikings and both these guys are healthy and you've got JJ McCarthy in there, I just fear there's going to be a little bit less volume, a little less scoring opportunity through the air, and Jordan Addison won't have that nice touchdown cologne that he's had for the last couple years.
Yeah, he's a really good player, is Jordan Addison. I think he took a
Yes.
step from his rookie season to his second season. But you're right, just like where he is at in this offense, he's always going to be a number two. And I like Jordan Addison, but I'm skeptical that he's, a Devontae Smith type where like, oh, on another team, he could be a one. I think he's just best suited as a really, 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 really good number two. And I mean, shoot, Jalen Waddle is a guy that's fit into that bucket before. We know that there's been some major volatility with Jalen Waddle over the course of his career, which is why I think you have to park Jordan Addison, despite how good of a player he is and the fact he's playing on this good offense. I think you got to park him. Like, to me, he's between George Pickens and Calvin Ridley and like Jaden Reed's in this area and like my fantasy rankings, because those guys are all up and down, up and down. Like, I don't think they're clean season long set it and forget it type projections. That doesn't mean I don't like Jordan Addison this year. I just think that's probably how he is going to score his points. But that being said, I want to close on the fact that you said that this is a Ferrari here. I think they might have souped up the Ferrari in the offseason, man. Like, this offense on paper looks better right now than yes, from Donovan Jackson to Ryan Kelly to Will Fries, they're better on the interior than they were last year. And I also think they're a little deeper at the skill position spots too, because they add Ty Felton in the third round, which at first, like, why are they adding another receiver? Like, they got enough receivers, but they don't really have somebody where, hey, he can be kind of a dump it off and create after the catch type player. That's not Jordan Addison's game. It's not Jalen Naylor. It's kind of like what this team has gotten out of Bilal Powell. It's kind of that. So they add a dimension in the wide receiver room. And then you've also got Jordan Mason at running back too, which is an upgrade over their depth guys at that position. I actually think there could be some weeks where Jordan Mason's the best running back on the team. So that's where it's hard to get too down on any of these guys. Like, unless JJ McCarthy just can't play football, which I'm skeptical that he can't play football. We haven't seen it. We have to acknowledge that. He's basically a rookie quarterback this year, but he did go through an offseason last year. He had a preseason moment last year. So he's not just completely green here. But as long as he can play, like, this is such a good setup for this guy to walk into.
Yeah, and I think we're at the point too where we kind of just have to let Kevin O'Connell and the staff here just give him the benefit of the doubt with everything. Like, at this point, like, they kind of, I don't want to say resurrected Sam Darnold's career, but they kind of did. And then when they signed Daniel Jones, everyone was like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen there. And we didn't get that. But you got a guy with this kind of pedigree coming in who's handpicked by Kevin O'Connell. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of it has been just learning in the background. He could end up being really good. And I'm willing to say, like, that yes, he's going to be a good quarterback. It doesn't mean that I want to go out of my way to draft all of the other weapons that are on this team. I like TJ Hawkinson where he's at in fantasy. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is a must draft. I'm actually cool with some of these running backs too, because I think they'll probably end up going a little bit later.
All right, Alfredo, we've said it all. We've identified where these players are at in terms of the quarterback wilderness, whether it's nebulous or whatever. There are no guidelines here. There are no strict rules. That is what the quarterback wilderness is all about. All we hope for is that all of these guys get the hell out of it by the end of certainly by the end of the season, at the very least by the end of their careers. I appreciate you doing this with me, man. What are you working on right now that people can check out?
So over at Football Guys, man, we're finishing up a bunch of our dynasty stuff and getting ready to start with fantasy rankings. We've got the Football Guys YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@footballguysfantasy, where I host the Football Guys Fantasy Show over there. We'll be doing shows once a week and then ramping up as the season gets closer and closer. But yeah, we just did our rookie guide too after the NFL draft. The NFL draft felt like it was honestly 9 months long, man, that whole process. But glad that I was able to write scouting reports for that and be a part of that rookie guide as well. So lots of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, I feel you on the NFL draft process. And yes, everybody should definitely go check out the Football Guys YouTube channel. Look, I come off the Football Guys coaching tree. A lot of love for Joe Bryant, Sigmund Bloom, and everybody that's doing great work there right now. So definitely go check that out. Show that some love. And definitely make sure you check out all of Alfredo's work, because not only is he a great fantasy analyst, he also knows ball too. So I appreciate you. I think first time jumping on the show here, man. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that. That is going to do it for today's show. For the true diehards, the sickos, the real fans of this podcast, you all will remember the series from the past few summers. Flip the Script is back for the entire month of June. Starting next Wednesday, we're going to try to identify and predict the biggest fantasy storylines and surprises of the 2025 season using last year's results as our guide. A little tongue-in-cheek in terms of who's this year's whatever, but it's all good fun. It's June. What else are we doing here? Scott Pianowski is going to join me for the first edition of that, which is who is this year's Cincinnati Bengals, the Carnival offense and the Carnival offense/defense of the 2025 season. That is coming to your feed next week. Until then, we are out.